The EX cards are really strong, and I don't mind battling them, but a lot of people think they're too strong. And I get it. Sometimes they can feel impossible to beat. Battles would go very differently if you could just get rid of your opponent's EX cards. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to queue random battles until I've put away every EX Pokemon. Forcefully. And also literally, by using Aerodactyl's weird attack. With Primal Wing Beat, if you flip heads, your opponent's active Pokemon gets banished forever. Actually, it just gets shuffled into your opponent's deck. So today, I'll be doing something I call the Aerodactyl challenge. Use Aerodactyl's attack on all 16 EX Pokemon. And to do that, I made a deck specifically built for speedrunning this challenge, because this is going to take a long time. I'm using Victreebel's ability to bring up anyone hiding on the bench, which will work on the 6 EX cards that are basics, and for the rest, I can at least trap them before they evolve. I also have Meowth for extra card draw, so I can find my Aerodactyl as soon as possible. And also because I only have one Aerodactyl, so he's extra hard to find. With the dream team assembled, it was time to start the journey to save the meta, starting with our first opponent, and they already conceded. Okay, starting with our second opponent, and once I saw the Ralts, I knew that Mewtwo was soon to follow. It was no surprise that we found Mewtwo first, and I got around their unorthodox Chansey wall pretty easily with Victreebel. And with the heads on my first Primal Wing Beat, this was probably the best start I could ask for. Next, we were against a Dragonite deck with a Lapras wall. This was a race between me finding my one Aerodactyl and my opponent finding a single water energy for their Dragonite. And unfortunately for them, their energy zone gave them 5 lightning energies in a row. But fortunately for me, I flipped heads first try again, letting me cross Lapras off the list. There was a certain EX pair I expected to see a lot, and it already showed up by my third battle. I was up against the classic team of Pikachu, Voltorb, and Dratini. I had never seen Pikachu with Dragonite before, but I was very glad to see it for this challenge, because it meant that Pikachu was capped at doing only 60 damage. So although they got a couple KOs early, I was able to stall with Victreebel until I found my Aerodactyl, who somehow happened to be the last card in my deck. I got another lucky flip on Pikachu, which was then balanced out when I flipped Tails on Zapdos. My opponent could have retreated and won here, but I guess they were feeling generous because they wasted the energy and ended their turn instead. And I was very grateful for that second chance, because this time I flipped heads. The next battle finally had a non-EX deck, but right after that I found Wigglytuff. And this one could have been a problem if I stayed asleep, but I somehow continued to have really good luck, waking up from Wigglytuff's first attack and then flipping heads first try again. By this point, I was feeling really good about the run. I was already more than a quarter of the way done after only 5 battles, which made me think that maybe this challenge wouldn't take so long after all. But I was very wrong. Because on Battle 9, I had my first encounter with the enemy for this run. Normally, it's good when your opponent can't find their evolutions, but when that happens for this challenge, I lose a lot of time. And in this battle, my opponent didn't evolve into Gengar until the 15th turn. So it really stung when after waiting for so long, Aerodactyl failed the Primal Wing Beat. Especially since that was our only chance, because Gengar's attack just so happens to one-hit KO. Gengar gave me my first setback, and he showed up soon after again to give me even more trouble. This time my opponent evolved pretty quickly, except to the wrong Gengar. But even that was tough to deal with. While I was searching for Victreebels, they quickly took out both of my Meowths. And the baby Gengar also prevents me from using supporters, so when they finally evolved into their EX, I couldn't use Sabrina to bring that up. Those Gengar battles weren't great for the run, but at least after that, I found the first Marowak. They hid behind their Dugtrio for a bit, but thankfully they brought up their Marowak for me, and I flipped heads on my first try. And you have to understand that getting matched into new EX cards like that is really fortunate, because the biggest time losses for this challenge are either running into EX Pokemon that I've already finished, or running into decks without any EX cards at all. Although queuing so many matches means I do get to have some funny moments, like when I did 10 damage back and forth with the Ditto deck for 22 turns. The fun was quickly ruined though, because my enemy Gengar returned for the battle after. And of course, I flipped Tails again. But after a few more opponents, I finally ran into my first fire deck. Except no EX cards here. Well, it looked like a standard Blaine deck, but then my opponent surprised me with Moltres EX, which of course I will gladly take. Well, hold on. Okay, there we go. And then not too long after that, I ran into my first water deck. Here was my chance to cross Starmie off the list, except I flipped Tails. But since Starmie can't one-hit KO us, I got another chance. Which was also Tails. Though I didn't have to wait too long for the rematch, since my next battle was against a Starmie Blastoise deck. Except this was the wrong Starmie. I would have tried to finish Blastoise here, but the fake Starmie wiped both of my Meowths out, and by the time they brought up Blastoise, it was too late for me. You would think things couldn't get even worse, but look who showed up for Battle 35. And I was ready to get redemption, but technically Gengar didn't even show up, because they evolved into Haunter and then stopped. I tried to wait for Gengar for as long as I could, but at that point their Mewtwo was fully set up, so I had to keep moving on. I had to get through 8 more duplicates and non-EX decks until I was finally rewarded with another Gengar. Except, yeah, guess what happened again? And after a few more duplicates, I ran into my first chance for Machamp. But the stage 2s must be cursed or something, because my opponent never even evolved past Machamp. And I haven't even been trying to win these battles, but this person still conceded. I've cut a lot of battles out because at this point it had been hours without any progress. This challenge was tedious, but it wasn't impossible as long as I never gave up. And what better way to test my resolve than by finding Gengar once more on Battle 50. The only thing protecting Gengar this time was a single Hypno, and after taking care of that, I was again face to face with the villain of the run. And after 5 failed attempts, Gengar was finally conquered. This might have been the turning point for the run, because I found my first Charizard in literally the next battle. And maybe my opponent was feeling extra generous, because they evolved right in front of me before it could attack, making this the easiest EX to cross off by far. Crossing off 2 EX cards back to back felt great, and the momentum continued when I ran into my first Articuno. And of course they had the turn 1 Misty, but thankfully they didn't get lucky on that. I flipped heads on the Articuno first try, and although I flipped tails on Starmie this time, it didn't take too many more games to finally flip heads. And I don't know how it took this long, but I finally ran into my first grass deck. This was extra lucky too, because it had both Venusaur and Executor, so I had a chance to cross off both in one game. I actually almost ruined this chance when I autopiloted and put my energy on Bellsprout instead of Aerodactyl. But thankfully I had extra good luck to save me, and I flipped heads on both Executor and Venusaur first try. The run was finally going really well again, but of course that couldn't last forever. By this point I had only 3 Pokemon left on the list, except finding those 3 were gonna be especially tough because they're not the most commonly played. There's not much of a reason to play Blastoise when you can play Starmie or Articuno instead. It wasn't until Battle 89 when I finally found another Blastoise deck. Except that ended pretty quickly after their turn 1 Misty with normal Articuno. Not even the EX Articuno. But the actual most elusive EX was Arcanine. I had been searching for hours and I hadn't seen a single Arcanine in the entire run. It took me 120 battles to finally find my first Arcanine, and I really could not afford to mess this up. By the time I got Aerodactyl ready, their Arcanine was fully loaded with energies, so I only had one chance to flip heads. And guess what happened? I failed this extremely rare encounter, and now I had no clue when or if I would ever see Arcanine again. I was pretty sad about that, but not for too long, because immediately after I found a Blastoise Gyarados deck. And thankfully for my sanity, I was finally done with Blastoise. There were now only 2 EX Pokemon left. I tried searching for a bit longer, but after running into 18 more duplicates, I decided to pause and continue the next day. To finish the challenge, I was going to need a clear mind and also some sort of miracle to happen. I asked for a miracle and actually got it, because for my first match on day 2, I finally found a second Arcanine. And for some reason, my opponent was playing not only Fire Energy, but also Fighting and Grass Energy. I don't know why they did that, but I was just glad to see another Arcanine after so long. With the Arcanine almost powered up, this was my only chance for an Aerodactyl attack. And I flipped tails again. I was going to concede there, but then I realized the Arcanine actually couldn't attack next turn, because the next energy in their energy zone wasn't fire, it was grass. This game truly was a miracle, because now I had a second chance. And this time, it was finally heads. With Arcanine done, only Machamp was left. And of course, I had to search for a long time again, but then on Battle 196, I finally found it. It was a Machamp Primate deck, and I really did my best to encourage them to not use Primate. I even stopped attacking at some point because I could not afford to ruin this encounter. After a few turns, they finally evolved to Machamp, and then this happened. After 196 battles, the Aerodactyl challenge was complete. For the satisfaction, here's every EX Pokemon getting shuffled away. Yeah, that took way too long.